Three things on the table this morning. A jar of plain water. A jar of water that has been sitting on a handful of fallen leaves. And that same handful of leaves, pulled back out, dripping, on a white plate. That dark jar looks expensive. If color were the same thing as plant food, it would be the most valuable object in this garden. So here are the three questions I want to answer. What water can actually pull out of a fallen leaf? What stays behind? And why leaving that jar another 2 weeks does not simply make it stronger? That last one is the part almost nobody gets right, and it is not what you are expecting. Nobody who tries this is being foolish. The logic is beautiful. Leaves have nutrients in them, the water turns brown, so the brown water must be concentrated leaf food. The first two steps are true. It is the third one that quietly falls apart. You have seen the same thing at your own kitchen sink. Drop a bunch of kale in cold water, come back in an hour, and the water has gone green and cloudy. Nobody looks at that bowl and says, "Well, I have made compost." We know the kale is still kale. Somehow, once leaves and a bucket are involved, we forget that. 3 words get mixed into one in almost every video on this subject, and separating them is the whole key. Leaching. Water dissolving whatever was already easy to dissolve. Water is not doing chemistry in there. It is doing laundry. Decomposition. Fungi, bacteria, small soil animals, and simple physical breakdown, taking plant tissue apart. That needs living organisms, and it needs time. Mineralization. The last step, where nitrogen and phosphorus locked inside organic compounds finally become forms a root can take up. Here is the picture I keep in my head. Water opens a few drawers. Microbes take the house apart. Everything else in this video hangs off that one sentence. So let us set up a test you can run on your own counter, and let me be straight about what a test like this can and cannot settle. 4 identical jars. Same tree, same species, dry leaves, the same weight in each. Same water, same spot, same light. Jar A is water only. That is the control, and you need it, because your eyes will lie to you without something honest to compare against. Jar B is whole leaves for 24 hours. Jar C is the same weight of leaves, torn and crumbled first, for the same 24 hours. Jar D is the same as C, left considerably longer. Now, what would we expect? If the shredded jar changes faster than the whole leaf jar, that would make sense. Not because shredding created anything, but because tearing a leaf exposes far more surface for water to work on. That is the hypothesis. So let us go and see what the published research says is actually leaving the leaf. Long-running forest research in New Hampshire followed birch, maple, and beech leaves as they broke down on the forest floor, tracking the elements one at a time. Potassium and magnesium moved early, carried out by water. Calcium behaved completely differently. Calcium only came free as the leaf itself lost mass, because calcium is built into the structure. A separate study of dogwood, red maple, and chestnut oak litter put a number on that gap. Over 2 years, most of the potassium had been released. Less than half the calcium. Same leaves, same 2 years. One element practically walks out on its own. The other has to be taken apart before it will move. That is your brown water in a sentence. It is very good at collecting things that were already loose. Along with them you get dissolved sugars, some organic compounds, and the tannins and pigments that give the water its color. A little soluble nitrogen and phosphorus can come too. But most of the nitrogen and phosphorus in a leaf is bound up in compounds microbes have to work on first. Now that color is doing something to us. The brown is largely tannins, phenolics, and pigments. The same family of chemistry that makes tea brown and makes an oak leaf taste bitter. Color tells you something dissolved. It does not tell you what, or how much, or whether a root can use any of it. And here is where I will push back on something you see everywhere. Videos dip a meter into that jar, get a big number on screen, and hold it up like a receipt. That meter reads electrical conductivity, how well dissolved ions carry a current. It cannot identify individual nutrients. It cannot tell potassium from sodium. And a high reading is not evidence that a solution is balanced, or plant available, or safe at any dilution. Stir a spoonful of table salt into that jar, and the meter would be delighted. Your tomatoes would not be. So here is the teaching point I would like you to keep, because it is the one that actually matters. What is in the original leaf is not the same as what is in the soak water, and neither of those tells you what a plant can take up. 3 different questions. Most gardening content treats them as one. Which brings us to the part I care about. Reach in and pick the leaves back out. They are still leaves. Softer, darker, limp. But structurally they are still leaves. And that is the entire story of this video. The cellulose is still there. The hemicellulose is still there. The lignin, the tough reinforcing material that makes a leaf instead of a puddle, is absolutely still there. There is a measurement on fallen willow litter that puts a scale on this. In the first 24 hours of soaking, it released roughly 8 milligrams of dissolved carbon per gram of dry leaf. A dry leaf is close to half carbon by weight, 8 milligrams out of roughly 500. That is one species in one study, and other leaves and longer wetting would give different numbers. But it tells you the scale of what a day of soaking achieves. So here is the reveal. If you keep the brown water and put the leaves out at the curb, you kept the small share and threw away the large one. You did not extract the treasure, you rinsed it. Before we go further, I want to hand you something, and there is no catch. Everything in this video, the jar setup, an observation sheet to fill in yourself, mulch depths, the leaf mold recipe, a caution table and the full source list, is in a printable guide, the Fall Leaves 2-Speed Soil Builder Guide. There is a code on screen. Point your phone camera at it and it downloads. No email, no sign-up, no cost. Print it and take it out to the pile with you. Now, Jar D, the long one. Almost everybody assumes the same thing, and I did too. If a day pulls out a little, 2 weeks must pull out a lot more. But something else is going on in a closed jar of plant material and water. Pack organic matter into water, and the oxygen dissolved in it gets used up. How fast depends on temperature, how much material, how tightly it is packed, and whether anything is stirring or aerating it. In a small jar, packed full and left alone, that can happen quickly. And once oxygen runs short, the microbial community shifts. Different organisms, different chemistry. Research on plant residues decomposing in waterlogged, oxygen-poor conditions found organic acids, acetic acid among them, building up to levels that reduced root growth in young seedlings. In the same work, keeping the system aerated prevented that buildup. So the honest lesson is not that leaf water is dangerous. It is that longer does not mean stronger. Longer means different. You did not brew a more powerful fertilizer. You started a fermentation you are not measuring and cannot identify. Which is exactly why I will not give you a recipe that says, soak for 14 days and pour 1 cup on every plant. Nobody can tell you what is in that cup. So if water only rinses the leaf, what does the real work? Decomposition is a team effort. Bacteria, fungi, mites and springtails, earthworms, and plain physical fragmentation all take a turn. But fungi are especially good at the tougher, more resistant structural material in a leaf, and they are not working alone. They run fine threads into the leaf and release enzymes that break the structure down from the inside. That is why a leaf pile works cold and slow instead of hot and fast. And it is why white webbing running through a pile in February is one of the best signs you are doing it right. That is fungal growth, and it means the process is running. Which brings us to what to actually do this weekend. 2 things, at 2 speeds. The fast one, shredded leaf mulch, ready the same afternoon. Which leaves anything healthy off your own trees, oak, maple, birch, ash, fruit tree leaves, all fine. The thick leathery ones, magnolia, holly, sycamore, are not a problem, just slower. More shredding or more patience. How finely. Wait for a dry day, spread the leaves thin across the lawn, and mow. 2 passes, the second at right angles to the first. You are aiming for pieces roughly the size of a quarter or smaller. Because that is what shredding is actually for. It does not create nutrients. It cannot. It stops whole leaves from gluing themselves into a sheet that sheds rain instead of letting it through, and it gets fragments down in contact with the soil, which is where decomposition happens. Where and how deep? Penn State Extension's guidance is 2 to 4 inches of shredded leaves around trees and shrubs and over perennial beds. On the lawn itself, a much thinner layer. You should still see grass through it. Keep it pulled back a couple of inches from trunks and stems. Never piled up against bark. Too thick looks like this. The layer stays soggy underneath. Water beads and runs off instead of soaking in. And in spring your perennials come up through a mat instead of through soil. If that is what you are seeing, rake some off and fluff the rest. Over winter it settles, darkens, and by spring it is noticeably thinner. That is not loss. That is the material moving into the soil. Second speed, leaf mold. The pile you start now and mostly forget. Container, a wire cylinder, a wooden bin, a breathable sack, or just a heap in a corner. Penn State suggests roughly 3 to 6 feet across and at least 3 feet tall. Bigger holds moisture better, and moisture is what matters. Shred or whole, both work. Oak, beech, and hornbeam break down well, even whole. The Royal Horticultural Society singles those 3 out as making the finest leaf mold. Thick leaves want shredding, and shredding roughly halves your timeline. Moisture is the whole game, and it is where most piles fail. Wrung-out sponge. Wet each layer as you build it, because dry leaves in the middle of a pile can stay dry for years. Squeeze a handful. It should hold together and not drip. Turning is optional. It speeds things up and evens out the moisture. Skipping it costs you time, not quality. Time frame. Left completely alone, roughly 2 years. Shredded, kept damp, turned occasionally and covered. Penn State says 6 to 12 months. What finished leaf mold is like. Dark brown to nearly black. It crumbles between your fingers. No recognizable leaf shapes. And it smells like a woodland floor after rain. Earthy. If it smells sour, it is too wet. And you do not have to wait for perfect. At about a year, when the leaves have lost their shape, but you can still see fragments, that is excellent mulch. Use it. The fully finished material is what you fork into beds or blend into a potting mix. The lowest effort version of all. Fill a heavy sack, wet it as you go, punch a few air holes, tie it loosely, and put it behind the shed. Come back next autumn. And here is the thing to hear clearly, because this is where gardening content oversells. Penn State says it plainly. Leaf mold is not high in nutrients. Its value is physical and biological. The material itself can hold several times its own dry weight in water. Extension figures put it at 3 to 5 times over. Read that carefully, because it gets misquoted constantly. It does not mean adding leaf mold makes your soil hold 5 times more water. It means you are adding a material that is itself a sponge, one that opens heavy clay and gives sandy soil something to hold on to. That is the point of it. Not that it feeds a tomato next Tuesday, but that it changes the soil that tomato has to live in next July. One gardener worked this out long before anybody was soaking leaves in jars. Ruth Stout gardened in Connecticut for decades and refused to dig. She simply kept the ground covered. Hay, straw, leaves, anything that would rot, year-round, and she planted straight into it. She never soaked anything, strained anything, or bottled anything. She put the material on the soil and let decomposition do the work. That is the 2-speed system, 50 years early. 3 quick cautions before I let you go. leaves heavily infected with a disease known to overwinter in fallen debris, are worth keeping out of a cool leaf mold pile, because it will not heat up enough to reliably kill much. That is not the same answer for every disease, so check with your extension office about the specific one. Black walnut. Fall leaves carry less juglone than actively growing tissue, and properly managed composting does break it down, but extension recommendations vary on how careful to be. If you would rather be safe, compost walnut leaves separately, mix them with plenty of other material, and let them break down thoroughly before they go anywhere near tomatoes or azaleas. And leaves swept off streets and gutters pick up road grit and residues, and a pile concentrates whatever is in it as it shrinks. Yard leaves rather than curb leaves for anything near food. And separately, because people ask. Some persistent broadleaf herbicides can survive composting in hay, manure, or clippings from treated ground. That is a question about where material came from, not a leaf problem. If you bring in material and do not know its history, your extension office has a validated pot bioassay for it. One last thing about the jars, because I am not telling you to pour real material down a drain. Whatever leached out is genuinely in there. It is just in the wrong place, separated from the carbon it belongs with. So put it back. Pour the liquid onto your leaf pile and drop the soaked leaves in with it. Everything that dissolved goes back where the decomposers are working. Nothing wasted, and nothing overclaimed. Let me put the two objects back on the table. The dark jar, and a double handful of finished leaf mold, nearly black, crumbly, smelling like a woodlot after rain. 20 minutes ago, the jar looked like the valuable one. Water can borrow a little from a leaf. Decomposition can unlock much more of what remains. And notice what most of us do every year. In October, we pay somebody to haul the leaves away. In April, we drive to the garden center and pay again for bags of mulch and soil amendment. Nobody designed that to be absurd. It is just what happens when the free material is inconvenient and the bagged material is easy. The tree spent an entire summer building those leaves, and then let go of every single one of them on purpose. We are the only ones in that arrangement who ever thought the falling was a problem. So do not turn autumn into tea and throw away the tea leaves. Rake them, shred them, pile them, and let something alive do the rest. One question for the comments. How long does leaf mold take where you garden, and do you shred your leaves first? The guide is free. The link is in the description. I will see you in the next one.